Let's bring in our panel of parliamentary journalists now. Susan Delacourt is a columnist with the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for Presse. And John Ivison is a columnist with the National Post and parliamentary bureau chief for Post Media. Good to see you all again. Susan, let me start with you. Aaron O'Toole is facing more questions now about his party's position on abortion because of this private members bill being brought forward by one of his backbenchers. How will this affect his efforts? It seems like another one of those things that sort of knocks him off message, and he's trying to win over more centrist voters. What's happening here?
Well, the problem, when a political leader has a problem, it's a bigger problem when it's a pattern. And this is another case where Mr. O'Toole says quite clearly that he believes something and people in his party believe something else. And, I think sometimes we get too hung up on, blind followership in politics, but I think it's not going to alleviate and probably add to the concerns about whether Mr. O'Toole leads a party that represents his views or vice versa. This is something that probably helped sink Andrew Scheer, and it doesn't seem that he's able to de-Scheerize the party in a way that he had hoped to.
Yeah, so let me go to, isn't that funny, Joël-Denis? You and I both speak French. De-Scheerize almost sounds like déchirer, which would tear apart the party. But what are your thoughts here? How big is this a problem for Aaron O'Toole?
Well, it is a big problem because it brings him very much into defensive mode. He wanted to go on the offensive on the vaccination problems, on the problems that we face with the vaccine rollout. But his message is being blown away by this kind of stuff today. And remember, 3 weeks ago, he was off message too because the party voted against the motion to recognize climate change was real. So that's two blows in 3 weeks. And the only party that is laughing right now is the Liberal Party because, they're getting ready for an election and they've got something of this nature, two great gifts from the Conservative Party to attack the Conservative Party. So it's not a good day for Mr. O'Toole. It hasn't been a good month for him.
Let me hear you on this, John, and a lot of this Joël-Denis raises about who gets to define who you are in politics, and this is yet another one of those things perhaps where it's being done for Aaron O'Toole.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the Conservatives yet again forming a circular firing squad and firing inward. The Liberals are promoting this, obviously. O'Toole would prefer not to talk about it. I mean, at the end of the day, this is a private members bill that is going nowhere. Right. Let's remember that. It was a bigger deal, a very similar motion on sex-selective abortion back in, I think, 2013 when they were in government. And there were a sizable number of Conservative MPs, including a good number of cabinet ministers, including Jason Kenney, who voted in favour of that bill. So this is not just a fringe member who will have no support for her bill. But at the end of the day, it's going nowhere. All the other parties will vote against it. And you have to wonder why at this particular time, as we're going into an election, that Conservative members would think this was a great idea.
Yeah. Susan, let's talk about the, Aaron O'Toole wanted to talk about his meeting with the Prime Minister today, and he got all the questions except for one, I think, or two, were about this private members bill. But pre-budget meetings between the Prime Minister and the opposition leaders, Mr. O'Toole and Mr. Blanchet today, I think Jagmeet Singh tomorrow, what's the real purpose of those meetings? For people watching, what are they, are these real things or is this all optics?
I think there's a little bit of optics there. I think, it's kind of standard, but Mr. O'Toole has already said he's voting against the budget, as is the opposition's right and almost duty to do. I think it is so the Prime Minister can say he's talked to them. I don't think that anything that Mr. O'Toole or Mr. Blanchet say in the meetings today will have Justin Trudeau on the phone to Chrystia Freeland saying, hey, change the budget. But I do think that he has to be seen as to be consulting them. It is a minority parliament. We're all supposed to be getting along. I actually think the budget is receding. I think we'll talk about this. Everybody wants to talk about, a budget being for the post-pandemic future. The problem is I don't think anybody's head is right now in the post-pandemic future. I think things are not exactly good right now.
Joël-Denis, what do you see in these meetings? Is there more to this than just the chance to say, look, I brought all the opposition parties together and then ignored them?
It's more optics than anything else, because I would say that the budget is essentially written right now. The decision has been made. It's being written and translated almost and printed. So because the budget will be tabled in a week from now, I think it's more for optics. The Prime Minister will be able to say, I consulted the opposition parties. They, said this and this and that. But at the end of the day, I have to make the decision, and this is where we're going. So, there might be some, if I may say, some input from the NDP that the Prime Minister might be able to take into consideration. But I'm sure that he's probably absorb most of the ideas that the NDP has been pushing in the last few weeks, a few months during the pandemic. So.
Yeah, John, I'm assuming the biggest idea he's absorbed is that Jagmeet Singh's already said he's not going to vote the government down. So that sort of limits the conversation in that big pre-budget consultation, doesn't it?
Well, these conversations can be important if the government of the day doesn't want to get brought down and is trying to do a deal with the opposition parties. I mean, we saw that in 2005, 2011. Both times elections happened because the opposition parties didn't get what they wanted. So I think there is a genuine purpose to them. But in this case, obviously, I think Justin Trudeau would not be unhappy if he was brought down. I think it's going to be very hard for him to engineer an election and bring himself down in the middle of a pandemic and not look like an opportunist. But these things sometimes have substance.
I got about 30 seconds left for each of you quickly here, but look at back to the COVID story and the numbers we're seeing surging across the country. And, I guess, fingers will point again here. And so which way are they pointed as we hit a rising third wave, Susan?
I think Trudeau has been taking most of the hits in the last few weeks, so people are going to start looking at the provinces just because this is somebody do something, and people are seeing that different provinces have different successes. So I think I actually think the provinces are going to take some heat on this.
Joël-Denis, what's your view?
I would agree, because if you look at the situation in Atlantic Canada, for example, for most of the pandemic, they've been able to control the pandemic, but it's not been the case in Ontario, Alberta, and Quebec. So I guess finger pointing will be much more at the provinces, although the federal government may be blamed from some part of the problems because they were still getting some of the vaccines.
Final thought to you, John, on this.
Yeah, I think particularly in Ontario, people are getting whiplash. I mean, parents got a letter from Stephen Lecce, the education minister, yesterday saying no, that schools would come back after the April break, and then today the schools are closed down. So I think people are frustrated. There is no plan. If there was a plan, we'd be able to see it. It's not there.
All right. Thank you all. We'll continue to follow these stories and talk to you again soon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.